So we're watching Kings and Generals Ottoman-Portuguese War, and something unique that I'm really looking forward into this series is learning a bit about Portugal. We've never covered Portugal in depth in this channel's history, and yeah, I can't think of any times Portugal really came into play in any of the past series we watched. But the thing is, Portugal, even in its heyday, was pretty powerful and influential as a nation. I think the most pivotal big event with Portugal is when, you know, it and Spain basically divided the new world between themselves, and in the age of exploration, and basically becoming a very powerful, overseas, empire. And that's kind of the big event that I know about with Portugal. And I've never really done much personal research into this place, but I'm really looking forward to kind of exploring a new European power, and the Ottomans. We're no stranger to the Ottomans at this point in this channel's history, because we've covered the rise of the Ottoman Empire by Kings and Generals and other Ottoman battles. So for the most part, kind of used to the Ottomans a bit more. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how the two fight. And like I said, I know Portugal was kind of known for its overseas naval power, and the Ottomans, at least in their early years, weren't really renowned for their navy, but later on they became powerful enough to stand toe-to-toe with the West and even get major victories. So, depending if the Ottomans are at that stage where their navy and their naval power is solidified, then this could be a great, war. If not, it might end up one-sided, with Portugal just, dominating. Again, I don't know about this war, but it is interesting to be back with the Ottomans again. And, yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than we should probably get to it, eh? So without any further ado, let's do it, my friends. Let's watch episode 1 of the Ottoman-Portuguese War by Kings and Generals.
The colonial conflicts that started with the Age of Discovery in the late 15th century often pitted unlikely foes against each other. In the 16th century, the Ottoman and the burgeoning Portuguese naval empires clashed across the Indian Ocean and Africa in a series of direct and proxy conflicts in order to gain colonial dominance. In this video, we will try to depict the most famous episodes of this long and complicated conflict. These long videos are extremely time-consuming and difficult to make, so consider liking, commenting, and sharing. Since Vasco da Gama first reached India after a circumnavigation of Africa in 1498, the reach and power of the Portuguese had been growing rapidly in the Indian Ocean. In 1500, the same Portuguese armada that had made first landfall in Brazil continued on to India, bombarding Calicut and establishing Portugal's first Asian factory in Cochin. By 1504, Portuguese ships were regularly plundering Arab shipping in the Indian Ocean, with a blockade of the Red Sea earning them the ire of the Mamluk Sultanate and of their trading partner Venice. Seeing that it couldn't oppose the Portuguese on its own, Calicut's ruler, the Zamarin, sent envoys to the Mamluks in 1504. The Mamluks were the strong
Yeah, the Mamluks were famed for their cavalry army, but they were inferior in naval warfare, which made them vulnerable to Portuguese raids.
Strongest empire in the Indian Ocean at the time, but its military was mostly made of elite cavalry.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Mamluks that just caught my interest. Every time we covered the Mamluks, their powers in their cavalry, right? I only really know them as a cavalry force, so I guess it's implying that they must have a navy, but I don't know if it would stand up to the Portuguese, because I guess even Kings and Generals is saying they're a cavalry mainly. I know I keep mentioning this game off and on, but I play Mount and Blade Warband religiously on my PS4, and and there's actually like a unit called the Malmooks, and they're kind of known for their heavier armor and like almost like cataphracts in a way. Like I kind of really like Mount and Blade because it combines a lot of like, you know, real life like units and stuff, but also puts its own like spin on it. I don't know. I think one of these days I gotta play it for this game. I've been mentioning Mount and Blade since the beginning of this channel's history, but one of these days maybe.
While the navy was often neglected, the small ships called dhows used by the Mamluks were inferior to the Portuguese vessels, as they could only carry light guns. So the ruler of Egypt, Kansa al-Ghori, sent his own envoys to the Doge of Venice, Leonardo Loredan, who agreed to help against Portugal. Another power to join the alliance was the Sultanate of Gujarat, ruled by Mahmud Shah I, which also reeled from the Portuguese piracy. Venetian carracks and galleys, which were mainly used in the Mediterranean, sailed to Alexandria, where they were disassembled. From here, the ship parts were sent to Suez by land and assembled again. Led by Emir Hussein Kurdi, the fleet left the city in November of 1505. Along the way, the Mamluks spent time fortifying the cities in western and southern Arabia against a possible Portuguese attack, as well as recruiting mercenaries in Arabia and Nubia. So despite the fact that the travel time to India usually took less than 2 months, the fleet arrived in Diu only in September of 1507, where they were joined by the Gujarati navy led by Malik Ayaz. Despite all of the attempts of the Allies, they weren't able to convince other states in western India to join their cause. The fleet was
So it's interesting they got Venice involved, and that's probably a great ally to have, this little coalition they're trying to form. Venice is also well known for its naval empire, and we covered that with the Venice video by Epic History, so if there's anyone that can help stand up to the Portuguese, I think Venice is a great ally to have. Another maritime naval power and empire that had great influence, you know, in the Mediterranean. So I think that's probably the best move that they've made off the bat, getting Venice involved.
Was significantly smaller and weaker than the Mamluks and their Venetian allies had originally planned, and only had 6 carracks and 6 galleys, which were joined by 30 smaller Gujarati galleys and 4 great carracks under the command of Diu's governor Malik Ayaz, with a largely mercenary force of over 4,000 crewing them. Further reinforcement came in the form of dozens of small boats from Calicut, their gunwales reinforced with cotton bales to strengthen them against Portuguese cannon fire. In terms of manpower, the combined Muslim fleet carried over 5,000 soldiers, sailors and oarsmen, notably including 450 elite Mamluks.
Thank you.
The Portuguese fleet opposing them, under the command of Jalmeda, consisted of 16 ships and 1,200 men, leaving the Portuguese rather outnumbered. The size of the Portuguese ships would give a significant advantage to Almeida during the coming battle, as would the formidable array of cannons each could bring to bear. But possibly the greatest advantage the Portuguese would have was the naval inexperience of Emir Hussein and the Mamluks, and the inconsistency of Malik Ayaz in his dealings with his allies.
Okay, so I'm getting the impression that the majority of this series is going to be just naval conflicts, and I'm actually excited about that, because usually we mainly cover only land wars and battles, so it's kind of cool that I guess the other series that's had a lot of naval conflicts was like when we looked at the Peloponnesian Wars between Sparta and, you know, Athens by kings and generals. That featured a lot of naval battles, and that makes sense, you know? So it's kind of cool. So overall, in this channel's history, we've mainly only covered land stuff. So it's kind of cool to now, you know, be taking it to the seas more. Because, again, Portugal is, you know, a naval power. in its heyday in history. So that's actually an aspect that I'm really looking most forward to, again, seeing more naval battles and just how strategy and battles are held on sea. What else? Oh yeah, we also looked at the Nelson videos by Epic History. So overall, yeah, it's kind of just cool to see. I kind of do like seeing whatever tactics or strategies, you know, how things are done in the sea, because obviously naval warfare does differ from land warfare in its own unique ways.
As the battle was being fought over his own city, Ayaz
Oh!
had more to lose than Hussein or the Zamorin of Calicut, and so seems to have tried to hedge his bets by making several overtures to the Portuguese,
Wait. Emir won, what the heck?
with his allies, Mamluks, and the inconsistency of Malik Ayaz in his dealings with his allies. As the battle was being fought over his own city, Ayaz had more to lose than Hussein or the Zamorin of Calicut,
Wow, okay.
and so seems to have tried to hedge his bets by making several overtures to the Portuguese, unknown to the Mamluks, following the Mamluk Gujarati victory in the Battle of Chol in 1508.
Wow.
It is possible that some of the disarray the Allied fleet was in upon Almeida's February 1509 attack can be attributed to Ayaz committing less than fully to the defense, perhaps even having struck a secret deal with Almeida beforehand. But given the rage Almeida had been in since his son's death at Chol, it is entirely possible that Ayaz was rebuffed, and that the shocking boldness of Almeida's frontal assault on the Diu harbour simply caught the Mamluks, little experienced in naval warfare, off guard, despite advanced warning from Calicut of Almeida's approach. Almeida's fleet approached Diu from the east, sailing at all speed towards the well-defended harbour. As battle was first joined at 11 on February 3rd, the Mamluk fleet and the bulk of the Gujaratis remained at anchor in Diu's harbour under the protection of its shore batteries, while the smaller oared vessels, both some Gujarati light galleys and the fleet from Calicut, ill-suited for the exchange of gunfire that was to begin the battle, had positioned themselves in the Diu Channel to the west of the harbour, intending to fall on the Portuguese fleet from behind once the boarding started. As Diu's shore guns would leave Almeida at a disadvantage in a long-range firefight, while a close-quarters battle of grapples and boarding actions would favour the numerically superior Muslim fleet, Almeida might have seemed to be sailing into a trap. Nevertheless,
Yeah, okay. But like, I'm wondering what trick he has up his sleeve, because I'm actually kind of like, okay. So their plan is they want the Portuguese to go into the raiding and basically not an open sea thing, and once they do, they're hoping that their numbers would favor them, and then these vessels here would just go from behind, basically a flank, and just, you know, essentially almost trap them, but like attack them on multiple fronts. And yeah, it does seem like the Portuguese are falling into that trap, but I don't think it's gonna be that simple. Maybe the I feel like Francisco has something up his sleeve right now.
he wasted no time in closing to grappling range, with only one short exchange of fire between the two fleets occurring before the Portuguese vessels sailed boldly into Diu harbour. The superior gunnery of the Portuguese was put to full use, sinking one of the 12 Mamluk ships nearly immediately, while the Gujarati shore gunners soon found themselves unable to safely fire into the tightly packed melee of ships. On the decks of the grappling ships, the heavily armoured Portuguese soldiers were more than holding their own against their more numerous opponents, and though the well-trained Mamluks fought bravely and fiercely, many of the mercenaries in the diverse Gujarati force lost their morale and abandoned their ships and posts under the noisy barrage of the Portuguese matchlocks. These early firearms proved more useful as a psychological weapon than for their killing power, however.
I see. So yeah, I was saying, like, they seem to have guns. They're using arrows. That's what I was about to comment on. Obviously though, these earlier guns probably aren't the killing machines that later guns would be, but Still pretty demoralizing, I imagine, being shot at all. Like, nerve-wracking. And so far, yeah, like, it seems like the Portuguese have bigger ships, stronger ships, better cannons or firepower on their ships, and in close quarters, better technology, at least with guns, and better armor. So it seems like the only advantage that the enemies of the Portuguese have is numerical superiority. But that's not everything. It seems like all the other advantages so far are falling into the hands of the Portuguese, though.
With volleys of arrows from the decks and crow's nests of the Muslim fleet taking a toll of their own on the Portuguese, Hussein's flagship was boarded early in the battle, with the fight eventually involving 2 ships from each side as reinforcements, turning the tide in one direction or the other. But the decision of the Muslims to remain in harbour had granted the initiative and mobility advantages to the Portuguese, who quickly found themselves with the upper hand.
Seizing the initiative.
This mobility advantage would prove the decisive factor, as despite their advantages, the Portuguese were still gravely outnumbered. Had the large fleet in the Western Channel been able to join the Malay unopposed, as Hussein had planned, Almeida's fleet would likely have found itself trapped, surrounded, and overwhelmed in short order. But Almeida himself, in his flagship Flor du Mar, did not join the Malay, instead continuing quickly westward past the harbour battle with 2 other ships to cut off the lightly armed oared vessels in the channel.
Wow. Okay, I see what he did. Yeah, they were hoping that the Portuguese would like basically put their all into attacking, but Francisco here has kind of like disrupted that original plan by going on his own over here to confront the lighter vessels. Wow.
Decision to split his fleet was rapidly proving disastrous, as he had kept all of the ships with heavy cannons in harbour in preparation for a firefight that never came. The fleet in the Channel was all but helpless against Almeida's flagship, despite the overwhelming difference in numbers. All of Hussein's ships that might have been able to engage Flor du Mar and immobilize or board it had been pinned down in the harbour, unable to intervene in the unfolding debacle. By giving up the initiative to Almeida and allowing the Portuguese to choose their engagements, Hussein had allowed a significant portion of his forces to be—
Again, I say this all the time, but whoever takes the initiative, 9 times out of 10 wins. and that goes to show just another important aspect of war. Like, you need to seize the initiative. Like, whoever has it, as we've covered so many in these videos, like, whoever dictates the war, dictates the battle, seizes the initiative for themselves, 9 times out of 10 wins. Or like, I'm trying to think of times where they didn't win, but I'm having a hard time. I'm sure there must be, but like 9 times out of 10, taking the initiative is what gives you victory, and the Portuguese just seized it. And that's why they're kind of dominating right now.
Neutralized by a small Portuguese task force. Over the course of the battle, Flor du Mar fired more than 600 cannon shots into the tightly packed vessels in the channel, sinking many before powder began to run low. In the harbour, with their reinforcements cut off, the Gujarati and Mamluk forces soon began to break against the well-armoured and well-trained Portuguese soldiers. As dusk approached, nearly all of the ships in the harbour had been pacified, their crews either leaping into the sea to swim for shore, perishing in battle, or surrendering themselves into the brutal captivity of the vengeful Almeida. Soon only one large Gujarati carrack remained, larger than any other ship in the battle, and too close to shore to be boarded by most Portuguese vessels. But despite its size and sturdy construction, the immobilized vessel was no match for the concentrated firepower of the victorious Portuguese fleet. and had no available avenue to escape as the smaller boats in the channel had. With its sinking, the harbour of Diu fell silent, the Portuguese having won a decisive victory that would secure their dominance in the Indian Ocean for decades.
Dang, man.
Portuguese losses were remarkably light, at 32 dead and 300 wounded. On the Muslim side, the Mamluks suffered the worst losses by far, losing their entire fleet and most of their men, though Emir Hussein escaped to shore with a small party to return to Cairo. The losses suffered by Malik Ayaz's largely mercenary force were similarly steep, bringing the total death toll to over 1,500.
Dang,
After
man.
a decisive Portuguese victory at the Battle of Diu in 1509 against Calicut, the Mamluks and the Sultanate of Gujarat, Portugal's dominance in the Indian Ocean would be unchallenged for nearly 3 decades.
Holy crap, that was completely one-sided. And again, that kind of goes to show just the complete, the power of the Portuguese, you know, naval power. So that was a cool establishing moment. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of if their enemies, like, adapt and get better, or if this entire series is just going to be Portugal owning everybody. So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow when we learn more, huh? Bye, everyone.